welcome back to Lost in Theaters, the podcast where we talk about movies that have slipped through the cracks of pop culture. I'm Rachel. I was planning to say I'm Ruth, and I just failed. It just failed.
But you're Rachel.
But I was thinking maybe if I said I'm Ruth, then you would say...
No.
Oh.
I'm Ruth.
Yeah, and I'm Rachel. And this week, we are talking about... This is it's not a funny movie. It's a pretty normal movie.
What?
Here we go. Let me just tell you. The Philadelphia Experiment from 2013.
It sounds...
Genre guesses?
You weren't just speaking another language. You said genre guesses.
We
got it.
Hermana.
Ew.
Continue.
Whoa.
Yes,
Well,
genre guesses.
Disturbing. Genre guesses? Do I have 3 guesses?
Yes.
Documentary.
No.
Horror.
No.
Children's lullaby.
The Philadelphia Experiment.
Look, I just thought I'd chuck it in there.
It's funny, because actually, it kind of is like the Secret of the Rats of Nim, but not at all. It's nothing like the Secret of the Rats of Nim.
Oh, thank you.
At all.
For your helpfulness.
But I just thought that's the closest thing when you said children. That was the first children's movie that I was like, I suppose if you were crazy, you might. Yeah, so if you're insane...
So it's not like the Rats of Nim at all.
That's correct.
Got it.
So when a certain group of people, when they heard me say the Philadelphia Experiment, their ears perked up.
Is it historical?
So wait for it. Okay, this is what's interesting.
Is it an abomination? Okay, I'm done.
All right. So there's 2 groups of people. One group of people know the Philadelphia Experiment movie from 1984. So there was a movie, and they're based on the same thing.
1984.
Yeah, this is not that movie. And I think the 1984 movie, if you Google the Philadelphia Experiment, the 1984 movie is the first one to come up. And I think it's beloved and well known by people because it's a science fiction sort of thing. Experiment.
What is this? Science
fiction. And then there was a sequel made in 1993 to that other movie. Yeah. And I'm not going to go into the details. I'm not going to go into that second group of people yet. So the first group of people would probably know this movie would probably have heard of the other movies. Right. And be like, they made another one? That's weird. And it's not a super great movie. I probably wouldn't suggest this to a lot of people.
Which isn't a super great movie?
This movie.
The one we are talking about?
The one we're talking about.
Or the one people have watched?
The one people have watched, I can't speak to.
Okay.
But this one is not great. What's so weird
up front
is that it's kind of lovable. If I had watched this movie when I was 8, which you could watch it when you're 8, it's pretty low on the Chaucer scale. Oh, I would say maybe a 5 on the Chaucer scale. Wait, what did we say? That's too,
scale works.
That's
anymore.
Too high. 2. A 2 on the Chaucer scale. Or what's a good comparison?
You told us that there was a lot of cussing in Bees Make Honey.
That's correct. Not a lot.
I said made it sound like it was just rampant. And
I said there was
unending.
one character who is particularly profane. In Bees Make Honey, not this one.
By which you mean what exactly?
It was just one character that uses some sharp words. Occasionally. Yes.
Like rarely.
Yeah. I would say this is definitely like a Lord of the Rings on the Chaucer scale.
Okay.
And I say that because it is a bit violent.
Okay.
But The Lord of the Rings is also violent.
See, I still don't attach violence at all to the Chaucer scale. It's just promiscuity, etc.
I know. Books be what they be, man.
What?
Bzz. So the other thing about this movie that's important to know going into why it's not it was made in 2013 and the problem is it uses CGI and the keyword here is not to great effect.
Those are a couple words.
Yeah.
Choice words.
The way the comparison is it's not totally noticeable at the beginning. It's pretty fine. And then throughout, sort of like the current CW CGI, like on CW TV shows, you can tell it's animated smoke. You're like, that's not real smoke, and I'm gonna ignore it. It's gonna be fine. Or you can think like that car was animated, but it's mostly okay. It's sort of like a step back from that, you know?
So it is no longer okay.
It's okay in small doses, right?
And this is just like spoonfuls.
I would say this happened just after The Rocketeer. So The Rocketeer was the burgeoning CGI, and you couldn't really tell that it was CGI yet. And this is when they took what they had for The Rocketeer and thought, let's just make a whole boat. And then
let's go.
And then you know when you look at it's CGI.
Yeah.
And but because you're sort of letting it wash over you though. Like, that's okay. But see, the bad part later on, there are whole sequences entirely made of CGI.
Nope.
And that's bad.
Yeah.
There's no texture. It looks like documentary like sequences that you know, when they think they're like, the pyramids were made and then destroyed this way.
And then they recreate.
Yes, and it's very smooth, and then they say, and the boulder hit the wall, and then it sort of, these blocks move, and and you just think, this is a good diagram. So that's that. And there's nothing spectacular about the movie or about the music, I mean, or even or the CGI, and the acting is fine. It's not bad acting per se. Some people might say it's bad acting. I didn't think it was bad acting. I thought it was fine.
Would anyone call it heinous acting?
I don't think so. Okay. I don't think anyone would say that was horrific kind of acting.
Unless they're, like, morally opposed to acting in general.
What is the hook here exactly? The hook here is the plot and premise is worth considering. And the problem is actually the execution is also pretty bad.
Dang it.
You have such hope, and it's good enough that you're willing to keep watching.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you are disappointed. And you just think,
weird.
Oh. It's very weird that way. And it's worth watching too if you want new ideas for thinking about, you know? But it's not necessarily.
So what is the premise hook?
Are we ready? See, this is now, okay, moving to the second group, low spoiler section.
Medium rare.
The second group of people who would know immediately what I'm talking about when I say the Philadelphia experiment are army buffs and conspiracy theorists. And this is because the Philadelphia experiment commonly refers to an actual sort of legend myth thing about this boat called the USS Eldridge. That legend has it was in sea in 1943, and it was an invisibility experiment by the U.S. government. And the ship disappeared and then reappeared in a dock, in a shipyard near Philadelphia.
Okay.
But there are theories about whether it actually disappeared, conspiracy things about it was all just a brain experiment by nut jobs trying to have false memories.
Side question. We never actually found out, is the movie we are currently talking about connected at all to the ones before?
No,
so
it isn't.
Zero connection. Totally different subject matter.
No, that's actually no, not zero. So they're not connected in timeline, but it's the same idea. They deal with the same myth, right?
Okay.
Playing on
but totally different execution.
Not totally different
people?
Because different people, different directors, different execution.
Presumably,
generally,
they were aware of it.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I would say because it has to do. So the question is, how did the boat show up where it did?
Yes.
So it's providing an explanation for this conspiracy, you know.
So historical fiction.
Yeah, kind of, but so one of the flaws of this film, the 2013 one, is that and I don't know if the other one does this or not, but it doesn't actually go back to the 40s ever.
What?
It's entirely set in the present day.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. So there's like a real missed opportunity there.
Seriously.
That's what I'm saying. It's a really interesting, like, in your mind you could build like a really cool story where you go back to the 40s and get that side, and you go to the present day and get this side, you know. It's really...
But no, it's just like detective from here.
Yeah, the whole thing is conducted from this side of the timeline. 2013. Actually, I think it's 2012 in the movie. And the 1984 version has a similar plot involves, are you ready, Ruth? Time travel.
Oh.
It's a plot involving time travel, and then the second one is a plot sort of like the butterfly effect idea, where you go back and change something and now everything's different in the future sort of idea.
Like the second Jurassic Park book?
Really?
I don't know. One of them has the thing at the beginning about the butterfly effect.
Oh, interesting. No, I don't know. I can't speak to that.
Great books. You can read them.
I know some books. Okay. Also, this film... I forgot to mention this, but it's still in the beginning half, so most people are listening who don't want major spoilers. This film is deliberately kind of edgy in its film style, and by that I don't mean in like a good way. I mean in, you know how people always complain about the lens flares in Star Trek?
No, but okay.
And they go across and they say something along the lines of, another lens flare. And so there's whole videos devoted to pointing out all the random lens flares in Star Trek because they think it's...
Seriously?
The director, he's a famous... I want to say James Cameron, but I don't think it's James Cameron. The director was really into them, apparently.
We know some Star Trek people who would know.
They would. We do know some Star Trek people who would know. Yeah, no, this one, the angles are tilted, you know, the camera's kind of tilted, and sometimes, this is an interesting shot idea, nope. And then, but not terribly all the time, but the opening scene is gold. The whole thing is upside down.
Really?
Yeah, the opening scene felt like a Christopher Nolan shot. I was, so
you were so close!
You just think this could be so good! And then you're just a little, you know, and then the act they start talking and it's just a little mediocre.
Yeah.
And then you get off to you see some animation and you think, it's a little mediocre.
Yep.
And it goes from there.
I think you're continuing to be a little mediocre.
So the general plot of the film is that there are these people experimenting with invisibility, and during the experiment, they're working with research that was done in 43.
Okay.
And when they are experimenting, they, during one of their runs, instead of when a car disappears in the middle of, what country? No, Philadelphia. In the middle of Philadelphia's...
The country of Philadelphia.
A shipyard, a huge boat just appears.
Oh.
It's actually a runway on a plane, sorry. A huge boat appears called the USS Eldridge, and then they figure out that they've actually... The scientists get told all the information, and the USS Eldridge didn't disappear. It didn't get retired. It turns out it disappeared, and they're like, we wish you'd have told us this information before.
Yeah.
And he's like, I think we've actually... the term is in my notes later, but they've ripped open some gravitational pull thing, and they're pulling things through time. So the boat got ripped out of 1943 and put into...
That's too bad.
And so
or exciting.
The plot... So generally, it has to do with people trying to fix this problem because the boat continues to go through with frequency, and it's sort of chaotic now. And
it just keeps traveling?
Yeah, kind of. It kind of does. It sort of like disappears and reappears in another place kind of thing.
Okay.
And then you also follow, there was one person on the ship that you follow, and there's a person outside the ship that you follow, and the scientist.
There's still people on the ship?
You'll hear about that shortly. So yeah, that's the general idea. And there's just the ideas and thoughts are really interesting.
Yeah.
To toy with. But the problem...
It's all too measured.
A little, but also not measured enough. At times...
Oh.
At times, the science that they're saying, or they're obviously making up the science.
So a freshman lab experiment. Lab course. This sounds like my physics class.
You're like... Yes, actually, a bunch of freshman physics students could have come up with the plot to this film. And and
that's why it's interesting.
Yeah, because it's playing with just enough science, but also the science is just weak enough that you just, at times, you think, oh, what? And another time, and the drama is just good enough that you think, hey, why just yeah. I just remembered a lot of...
You have said nothing.
I know! You don't understand. I just remembered some pretty interesting stuff that happens. And really awesome potential.
Well, tell us.
Let's go! To the full spoiler section.
Is it the same sound effect you make every time, or is it different? I don't remember.
I think it's about the same, but I don't know if I started the same tone.
Good point.
Okay. Anyway, now that doesn't sound like I ended in the right spot. Anyways, so, it opens up... I did forget to mention, one of the supporting actors' name is Malcolm McDowell. He has white hair, and he plays the fashion guy in Monk, the bad fashion man. Some people know who I'm talking about.
I don't.
It's okay.
I've watched all the Monk.
He was the one who he calls out Julie, and he says...
Oh, the bad fashion man.
The bad fashion man.
The one that Randy is, like, kind of imitating.
Yeah. Exactly. He's a famous actor, and he's in this movie. Continuing. Opening shot, so good. It's looking at the sky, and then you find out that you're looking at it upside down as it pans backwards to see a car, and it's really cool. It's really neat. And then this woman gets out, and she says, this better be good, because a scientist has come down, and he says, well, we've redesigned warfare for the 21st century. And what's so interesting about this guy is that immediately you don't like him. And you're not supposed to. It's so interesting. He's such a jerk, right? He is such a scientific, arrogant guy who thinks he's the smartest person ever. And he deserves to think he's smart, but we just wish he was nicer. And so they have to put on special glasses because they're in this room, sort of an antechamber with a window that looks into this room that has these Tesla coils set up. And they're sitting there, they put the glasses on, and they drive her car into the room. And they think, and she's like, my car! And he says, just you wait. So then they turn on the machine.
Don't like him.
Electricity hits the car from the Tesla coils.
Tesla is rolling in his grave.
They're measuring things in Teslas. Do you see freshmen? This description is so interesting because freshmen...
Yep.
Physics lab. Totally. You were exactly right. Measuring everything in Teslas. And they have to keep amping it up. And she says, is anything going to happen? And he's like, yeah, you just hang on. And then it reaches a point and the car disappears. And that's when you see your first really bad animation sequence. But if you're content, it's fine. It's not so bad that you just have the worst time of it. And it vanishes, but it only is invisible while it's being hit by the lightning strikes, and so it's it gets turned off, and the car comes back, and she's like, "That's good," and he says, "But we're cracking invisibility," but I totally understand why. It's sort of you have to be hit by these lightning, and we're content or whatever, and then suddenly everything starts still turning on. And this voice comes over the loudspeaker, and it's like, so someone's talking, and
Peanuts
like,
teacher.
What's going on? Cut to a plane taking off on a runway, and it takes off, and in front of it, suddenly it looks like a wormhole appears, and this ship shows up, and this airplane just barrels into the ship, and the man, and it explodes. It's so weird. You just think, it's weird because I didn't like the guy instinctively in the plane, but at the same time, he didn't deserve to go that way.
No. Dang.
So then, cut again to there's someone at a diner. It's a woman at a diner, and she's on a computer. And then the lady on the other side of the diner is like, is the decaf done yet? And she's on the computer, and she says, I don't know, or whatever. And then she gets up, and she's like, okay, that's the last time I'm changing your credit score.
What?
Card payment is on
What?
time. So she apparently is a hacker lady. You get it right away. They both work at the diner. These two women do. Then Carl, the cop, shows up and starts flirting with the smart lady, and it's, you know, sweet or whatever. And then...
What?
And then got back to the science lab, and the scientist is talking about, you know, they say, how'd you come up with this? And he's like, back in 43, they did some good work, you know? And then this other, like, side scientist comes up, and he's like, the signal that we were getting, sir, it came from the USS Eldridge. And this is so funny, too, because as someone watching the movie, as a critical watcher, someone who was, like, critically watching, this is when... they would start asking questions like, why does everybody know who the USS Eldridge is?
Yes.
You know? But it makes sense as you go along, but at the same time, it's kind of weird because everyone knows about this boat.
Oh.
But at the same time, it makes sense when you figure it out. But at the same time... Anyway. So the cop gets called away from the diner, and he goes to the runway, because... you know what happened at the runway. He shows up and he sees a World War II destroyer. Again, my brain was automatically like, this guy as a child was obsessed with ships, I'm sure. And that's why he knows that it's a World War II destroyer. How else could he just so definitively says it's a World War II destroyer on the runway. And you just think, I would have said a boat, to be honest. So the man...
You're not a U.S.
I mean, I could still know boats if I wanted. Okay, anyway.
You're not a U.S.
You cut again, and you don't know where you are now, and there's someone you haven't seen yet, and there are Tesla coils behind this person, and he wakes up, and he's kind of confused, and his shoes are melted to the floor. So he takes his shoes off, and he says, is anybody here? And he calls in the ship, and nobody's... answering, so he starts going around. Meanwhile, a scientist asks if the Eldridge was actually decommissioned, and this is when they find out that the Eldridge wasn't decommissioned, and they're like, "Great, why didn't you tell us?" And he says, "We're onto something bigger than invisibility. That's what's happening." And then the yes, so
very.
Oh, yeah, the guy on the boat. Okay. So, it's complicated because the guy on the boat runs out of the boat. But he doesn't run out of a door. He runs out of the wall because the wall... because the whole building... the whole thing kind of is fluctuating in light. And there's lightning and it's glowing a little bit. And there's... when the light passes by the wall, it gets less substantive. And he just gets scared and gets sucked out, and he runs away into the forest.
Oh my gosh.
Because nobody's there. He did see one person was legit melted to the wall, and his face is, like, sticking out of the wall. That's where all his comrades are, and you're really sad for him.
Aww.
So, yeah, he gets sucked out by the fuzzy lights, and that's what I called them. So the cop goes into the boat, because he heard the other guy inside yelling for help. So the cop is now on the boat, looking for the guy. The girl, whose name is Molly, arrives, who's his girlfriend, he was talking at the diner with her, the smart one, and he'd called her and was like, there's a boat! And she's like, oh my goodness! And so she shows up, and Molly arrives, and she starts talking to him on the radio. And what's so weird is that it's a cop radio, but no one else responds.
Oh. Again,
there are flaws, but it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, cut to the guy who ran off of the boat. He's just walking around now and is so confused.
Aww.
And it's really sad because he's so confused, and he goes to buy coffee and they say, it's like $3, and he's just shocked.
Yeah.
And then he pays with like a $5 bill that she says, are you sure you want to give me this? Because this is... no, really, I don't. I just gotta go. He's looking for the Navy. He's so confused. And he says he's looking for Molly, and then it says a last name. And Molly works at the store, And now that's confusing for us as watchers. 'Cause you're like, how does he know Molly? What's going on?
Is it a different Molly?
It's very strange. No. Oh yeah, so this is key. Back at the boat, the boat goes and there's a big explosion.
Molly's an alien.
And there's a sort of force field that comes out of the boat, and it's sort of any living thing, any human being in its way gets destroyed, and then it sucks back in and disappears. Like, and the boat's gone, and it hit a random person at the runway, and they're gone, but Molly's alive, and she's crying, and she goes back home.
But the cop is in the boat.
Is in the dang boat! It's very distressing. So Molly... she wakes up, she goes home, and she goes home, and the door is opened, and she's so confused, and she goes in, and all of these clippings are out about her grandfather, and they open the door, and then it's her grandfather, right, and so they have a heart-to-heart, and it's, she's freaked out, and it's weird, but it's also okay. They get along. It's nice. See? It's so nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. And, she has to break the news to him that basically everyone's dead in the family but her. Grandma passed away. Her mom has passed away. So he can't even see his daughter, who 2 months after she was born, he went on this boat. And you're just like, oh my gosh. Meanwhile, the scientist explains that,
we don't like this guy.
It's a gravitational tear that's happened.
Like him.
No, right? And it's pulling things. Gravitational tear, that's the term. I kind of like that idea. Pulling things through time, he says, and theoretically, they could go back through time and stop World War II.
No.
Do they go back in time? No. No time traveling. You never see the 40s, Ruth. You never see the 40s. Anyways.
This is upsetting to you.
It was. There are even moments when the color tone changed, and I thought we'd see the 40s. And then we didn't. Anyways. I don't know why. I wrote, the scientist wants the chief technician. Not sure why that's the case. Okay, so Molly... and she's talking to, she gets some clothes for her granddad that aren't his army clothes, and, he's like a normal, he's maybe 50 or 40, late, or early 40s or something,
Yeah.
So he's got these clothes now, and there's a knock at the door, and she goes to open the door, and he's like, I'm with the government, this person at the door, and she says, oh, okay, and then the phone rings, and then she says, I gotta go get the phone, you mind just waiting? And she goes to get the phone,
don't do that.
And then the guy on the phone says, you're in danger. No, it says,
keep going.
You're in
Wow.
You're in danger. That's better.
Is it Australian?
No. It's British.
Whoa.
I couldn't. Anyways, you're in danger, and then, she has a conversation, like one of those ones where you hear the path and she's pretending like she's ordering pizza or something. But she's, anyway, and she figures out where they need to go, and it's complicated, and then the bad guy turns out to be a bad guy, and she has to jump, they have to attack him, they take him down, and then they go and they borrow her friend from the diner's car. They have to run to the diner to borrow her car and some money, and then they leave, and then the bad guy shows up, and you think he's gonna beat her up, but thank goodness he does not. He just takes, I think so. I think the woman from the diner's okay. I just realized I don't think we see her for the rest of the movie. Anyway, he gets the security tapes. Whoops. She was such a sweet woman. Meanwhile, Molly and her granddad have gone to a payphone they were told to go to. They pick up the payphone, and then her dad, he had this earlier actually, I forgot to mention it, but he has this sort of like shock moment kind of thing.
What?
Where it looks like electricity is running through him, and he's sort of, it's almost like her granddad.
You said dad.
Oh, her granddad, sorry. And, but see, when he's experiencing this, the boat is also having a similar kind of thing, and when that boat disappeared the last time, he'd had that experience, and so it's reappeared on top of a building in the middle of Chicago. I write, Bill is getting electric. His name's Bill.
Nice. Electric Bill.
Electric Bill. They are told to remember the words his Molly picked up the phone. Is like, what do we need to know? Is Ivory Gate. Okay. So, the ship then. So what happens is the scientist says we need to get everybody out of there because bad things are gonna happen. Yeah. It's on top of here. The boat is fluctuating again. What are we gonna? They don't get everyone out of there. The military woman turns out to be a jerk.
Oh.
And this time it's
There's a military woman?
The woman at the beginning who was getting all the information.
Oh, yeah. Yes, okay.
The boat has an even bigger, like, moment, and it gets even more people just vaporized, and you're just so sad for everybody. And she says, next time, we're gonna bomb the boat, and the scientist says, no.
That would be bad. It's just
gonna build up more pressure, crazy person. And so then the scientist overhears that the woman is chasing this man who they figure out that the guy is off of the boat, and she's the one. The military lady is the one who's trying to get them, and she's like, you can try to get them alive, but if you can't get them alive, just get them dead. And he's so confused. His reaction is like kind of like our reaction in that it's sort of, what are you doing, woman? Stop it! And so it's interesting because you don't like this fellow.
Yeah.
But he has enough sense to know we need the scientist from that boat.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on?
Bill's a scientist?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So then they go, Molly and Bill have gotten to this other boat. It's like a speedboat place, and this British guy, who's the famous actor, he takes them on the speedboat across a pond into a car. The bad guys catch up to them.
No.
They have a car chase. Much of the car chase is actually spent with the man dropped his phone, and he needs the phone to set off a bomb. And so they spend this car chase rustling around the car for the dropped phone, which is really relatable. I dropped it! Anyways, the gas tank was hit, so they're running out of gas, and Morton, that's his name, the British guy's name, he got shot and he's dying. It's really sad.
I thought his name was Bill.
No, not the grandpa, the man, the British man. Yes, he's also old. Sorry.
Fashionista.
Yeah, he got shot and he's dying. It's really sad because he's says he's got friends who's gonna help Bill, and he just has to go to the lab and it'll be okay.
Okay.
He knows him from 1943.
Really?
Yeah, that's sort of kind of cool, right? And so they go off. He and Molly go off to the place. Meanwhile, the cops are blockading a road. Bill and Molly think they have to get across the road. Yeah. He has another, like, seizure thing. Accidentally touches a car while he's having it, and the car explodes.
Oh!
They get to the Salinger Institute, which is where they were supposed to go. But the guy they were supposed to talk to has been killed.
No!
And Molly just takes his computer, and they are being attacked by more people now because the people have come to get them, right? And now this is when the movie does something really interesting. It takes a sort of twist in a very cool way. It turns into a bit of a superhero movie.
Oh.
Because Bill, he gets hit with these bullets, but he's like the boat. So every time he gets hit, he absorbs this energy, and he figures out he can push it back. So he's got all these people firing at him.
Oh, cool.
And then he uses the energy to push them away.
Yeah.
And it's so cool.
It's actually consistent with what you've seen.
Exactly! Isn't it awesome?
Yeah.
And that's why I just wanted this movie to be a good movie.
Yeah.
This is so sad. I just imagined him living his life. What if there was a superhero like this who was attached to a time-traveling boat and who you couldn't tell the boat, nobody knew where the boat was, and so periodically this boat would appear, and he was attached to this, he had this power attached to it, and so every time he was suddenly called upon to use this, like the cosmic time boat appears, and he's now a superhero, and anyway, and he can push energy. It's just very interesting. Anyways, do you know what happens next, Ruth?
No, honestly.
Oh my goodness. The scientist shows up in a car. You figured it's more staged.
There's so much confusion in my face.
There's more staged, like, you get, like, more scenes with the scientist than you've got.
Yes.
But he has decided to leave the army lady and he's gone, and he knew where they were going. He figured it out. And he goes, and he gets them, and he's like, we'll have to drive, and they're... Yes! He's now their ally. And so they figured out...
Still don't like him.
Right? But at the same time, it's weird, because there's character development.
Yeah.
And he's just this random scientist jerk face. And you think, but... You've just sort of developed in weird ways.
This is the scientific world.
He's been pushed. He's been pushed to a point where he's realized that there is right and wrong. And he's got to make a decision. Anyways, so then they figured out that Granddad Bill has to get on the boat, and he's the only one who can actually shut it down, and he has to shut it down from the inside of the boat.
Okay.
And so they but they figure this out by the girl, of course, what does she do? Molly hacks the computer using her hacking skills that we know she has. And she gets the program off the computer to, and they think, so we have to get the boat to us.
Yeah.
So what do? They go back to the original lab, not the 1943 lab, but there was the lab the scientist was working in before the boat started jumping everywhere and the army lady took them somewhere else. It was complicated. So they go back to his original lab, and they put in the sequence from the computer to bring the boat to them. They do what they did initially.
Really?
And do this, like, summoning magnet gravitational thing.
Witchcraft?
Yeah.
No.
No. Not that, Ruth. And of course Bill starts to have his lightning problems, but the boat shows up and they got it. And then Bill says, he assures Molly, he's like, I'll see if Carl's there. And Molly's really attached to him now because he's really, granddad. And Bill leaves to go on the boat, and then the army lady shows up.
No.
Oh my gosh. And she shoots the scientist in the gut. Okay, this is so wrong. He just, like, says something, and she just is like, shoots him. He doesn't die. He's bleeding, though.
Yeah.
And it's awful. Meanwhile, Bill uses his magic electricity powers to... Carl has accidentally got his arm stuck to the wall.
Who is Carl?
The boyfriend.
Okay,
Cop.
right.
And so he uses his magic powers to dislodge that with his, like, electricity thing.
Poor Carl.
Meanwhile, Army Lady has sent a bad guy into the boat to beat up Bill. I don't know. She's just bad. Anyways, Bill, and so then, and the army lady says, we're gonna take all the technology out of this lab, and then we're gonna keep it and destroy the ship, and the scientist is just says, this is not how it works, woman, and she just won't listen, and so Molly helps, but then hits a guy who's helping her with something, and then the lady points the gun at her, the guy who's been shot kicks the gun out of her hand because he's on the ground and he like lifts his leg. It's a really great scene. The gun slides across the floor. Molly picks it up and the army lady says, you couldn't even. And then Molly just shoots her.
Yeah.
And it's so good because she just deserved to get shot, man. She just needed somebody to stop her. Somebody to stop her from being so bad because she was causing things to go worse. So Molly shoots her, but the best part is that so Molly has the courage to do it, but then she stays in character and she's freaked out afterwards, right?
Yeah.
It's not like, now I can do whatever I want. It's so characteristic because she's strong, but she's also like, that was just, you know? Anyways, so then, meanwhile, on the ship, Bill is trying to do the programming to get the thing to shut down.
Yeah.
It almost works, but then he gets attacked by the man sent on the boat. They have a whole fight. He's gonna lose. And then Carl didn't leave the boat when he was supposed to. And he shows up and takes down that guy. It's great. And then Bill says, get off the boat. And then Carl leaves. And Molly and Carl leave. And Bill turns off the thing. And there's a really horrible CGI moment when it's just awful. A black hole appears above a building. And all the buildings being sucked into the black hole. It's horrible. It's just horrible. And the boat flies into the black hole, Ruth. It's so bad. But at the same time, it like makes sense. But it's so bad. And then, last scene, back at the house. And you come in and you see all these photos. And Molly is with her granddad, and then you see Molly, and she's brought groceries home, and then the person closes the fridge door, and there's her granddad, old, and you see this picture of them at her, like, 12th birthday party, and then a picture of them at her wedding to what's his name, because he went back in time and was there, and that's the end of the movie. And so on the one hand, it's really sweet, but also I kind of want to know what happened to the rest of the people, but also character development was so good, and also it was just good. It was good, but bad. What? I just don't understand.
So this is the origin story of Bill Nye the Science Guy.
No. No, Ruth. It's better than that.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's our movie this week.
I would watch it. That's when, like,
right?
You know it ends well. Like, you know it ends well.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Wow.
I like safe movies.
It's a good movie. Closing song? I have a hat. The hat is green. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a lovely day to hear. I hope I'll see you again. I want to say next year, but that's not true. Probably next week. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks.